Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a world before Wi-Fi, before air conditioning, before even the humble light bulb. We're going to explore ancient America, not the America of cherry pies and baseball, but the America of mammoths and mastodons, a vast, untamed wilderness and communities forged in the crucible of raw survival. Close your eyes for a moment, if you dare, and imagine a sky so dark with stars you can almost taste them, a silence so profound it hums in your ears, broken only by the rustle of unseen creatures and the distant call of a predator. Feel the rough, cool earth beneath you, the chill of a night wind on your skin, and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. You're not just listening to a story tonight, you're about to live it. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a day. Not a single, solitary day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far these sleepy history lessons travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake with the sun, not to the gentle beep of an alarm, but to the harsh reality of an empty belly. Your first thought, before even fully opening your eyes, is probably, what am I going to eat today? Forget popping a frozen pizza in the oven or grabbing a latte on your way to work. In ancient America, every single calorie was earned through immense effort and often great risk. Your breakfast, if you were lucky, might be some foraged berries or nuts, assuming you knew which ones wouldn't make you violently ill. Or perhaps, if the hunt from the previous day was successful, a piece of dried meat, chewy, tough, and probably tasting a bit like dust and regret. Historians still argue whether early humans were primarily hunters or gatherers. But the truth is, you'd have to be both, and then some. Imagine spending hours, not scrolling through social media, but digging for roots with a sharpened stick, or patiently waiting by a stream hoping a fish, any fish, would swim by. There were no grocery stores, no food delivery apps, not even a roadside stand. Your pantry was the land around you, and it demanded respect, knowledge, and an endless supply of sweat equity. One mainstream historical fact about this era is that early peoples developed incredibly sophisticated knowledge of their local flora and fauna. They weren't just randomly picking things. They had a deep, inherited understanding of what was edible, what was medicinal, and what was downright deadly. This wasn't textbook learning. This was survival. Now, let's talk about the protein. You're probably thinking, oh, I'll just hunt a deer. Cute. Very cute. First, you don't have a high-powered rifle. You have a spear, maybe an otlotl, a spear thrower that looks like a fancy stick, but takes years to master. Or, if you're lucky, a bow and arrow that you painstakingly crafted yourself. And even if you manage to hit something, then what? You have to track it, kill it, and somehow get it back to your camp, all before it attracts every scavenger within a 5-mile radius. It's not like a trip to the butcher shop where everything is neatly packaged. You're dealing with a steaming, bloody carcass that needs to be butchered, preserved, and distributed, all without refrigeration. Good luck with that. One quirky tidbit. Some early American cultures actually used controlled burns to manage forests, not just for clearing land, but to encourage the growth of specific plants that attracted game. They were essentially landscaping for dinner. And what about those days when the hunt failed, the berries were sparse, and the fish just weren't biting? Hunger. Real hunger. The kind that makes your stomach ache, your head swim, and your thoughts fixate on nothing but sustenance. You wouldn't be hangry, you'd be existentially hungry, constantly operating on a calorie deficit. Your body would adapt, yes, but your energy levels would plummet, making the next hunt, the next forage, even harder. It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Every decision, every movement, would be dictated by the desperate need to find something, anything, to eat. That late-night snack craving? Forget about it. You'd be lucky to have one meal a day, and it certainly wouldn't be an Instagram-worthy charcuterie board. It would be a bowl of gruel, if you were lucky, or maybe just a quiet acceptance of another night of empty stomach rumblings. So, you've survived breakfast, or at least the attempt at it. Now, about that thirst. You're parched, your throat feels like sandpaper, and your modern brain immediately conjures images of sparkling filtered water, perhaps with a slice of lemon. But here, in ancient America, every sip of water was a gamble. You'd likely head to the nearest river or stream, a place that, to your modern eyes, would look wonderfully pristine. No plastic bottles, no factories churning out pollutants. Just nature, raw and untouched. Or so you'd think. One mainstream historical fact that often gets overlooked is just how critical and how dangerous water sources were. While the water might look clean, it was teeming with microorganisms that your pampered 21st century gut simply isn't equipped to handle. We're talking about bacteria, parasites, and viruses that cause dysentery, cholera, giardia. All those fun diseases you've only ever read about in old medical texts or travel advisories for very, very remote places. Remember that refreshing gulp of stream water? Congratulations, you just signed up for a week of debilitating cramps, uncontrollable. Well, you know, and a fever that would make you wish for a quick end. And without a pharmacy around the corner, or even a doctor who understands germ theory, that simple case of traveler's tummy could easily turn fatal. You wouldn't just be uncomfortable, you'd be fighting for your life, losing precious fluids and energy with every visit to the bushes. And it wasn't just about the microscopic nasties. Access to water itself was a daily challenge. Rivers could flood, wells could run dry, and lakes could freeze solid. You couldn't just turn on a tap. You might have to walk for miles, carrying heavy animal bladders or woven baskets, just to collect enough water for a day's worth of drinking and cooking. Imagine that trek, thirsty already, under a blazing sun or through a driving rain, all for a resource that might still make you desperately ill. It really puts your Brita filter into perspective, doesn't it? There's a quirky tidbit about some early American communities, particularly in the arid Southwest, who developed incredibly sophisticated water management systems. We're talking about intricate networks of canals, reservoirs, and check dams to collect and store precious rainwater, sometimes even diverting water from distant springs. This wasn't just digging a ditch. It was engineering on a grand scale, a testament to how crucial water was to their very existence. They knew, far better than you, that water wasn't just a convenience. It was life, literally. Historians still argue whether the decline of some ancient civilizations, like the ancestral Puebloans, was directly linked to prolonged droughts and the failure of these water systems. It makes you think, doesn't it? Our modern world frets about water scarcity, but we still have the luxury of turning on a tap. For them, it was a constant, immediate threat. So, you're constantly thirsty, constantly at risk of a gut-wrenching illness from every sip, and constantly expending energy just to acquire the water in the first place. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a foundational vulnerability. Your immune system, so used to a world of purified and sanitized everything, would be in constant overdrive if it didn't collapse entirely. You might survive the initial shock, but every subsequent exposure to contaminated water would chip away at your resilience, leaving you weaker, more susceptible. Remember the feeling of being run down after a bad flu? Imagine that as your baseline, constantly. This daily struggle for clean water would drain you, physically and mentally, making every other challenge, from finding food to building shelter, even more daunting. Your body would be waging a silent, microscopic war every single day. Alright, you've somehow found some questionable water and perhaps a few meager mouthfuls of food. Now, imagine a stubbed toe, a paper cut, if those existed, a common cold. In your world, these are minor annoyances, easily remedied with a quick trip to the medicine cabinet or a pharmacist. Here, in ancient America, a seemingly trivial ailment could quickly escalate into a death sentence. Let's start with that stubbed toe. It might seem harmless, but without proper cleaning and sanitation, that tiny break in the skin is an open invitation for infection. Bacteria, ever present in the environment, would swarm in. Without antibiotics, without even basic antiseptic wipes, that toe could become red, swollen, and painfully hot. A nasty infection like cellulitis could set in, spreading rapidly. Your leg might begin to throb, a dull ache turning into a searing agony. And if it turns septic, well, your body would essentially begin to poison itself. You'd develop a high fever, chills, confusion, and eventually, organ failure. All from a stubbed toe. It's a stark, brutal reality, isn't it? One mainstream historical fact is that life expectancy in ancient societies was significantly lower than today, often well below 40 years, and a huge contributing factor was the rampant prevalence of infectious diseases and the lack of effective treatments for injuries. Every cut, every scrape, every cough was a roll of the dice. Your modern immune system, while robust against the usual suspects of contemporary life, would be utterly overwhelmed by the sheer bacterial and viral load of the ancient world. And what about something more serious? A broken bone, for instance. Say you slipped on a wet rock while gathering berries, or perhaps a hunting accident went awry. There are no x-rays to confirm the break, no orthopedic surgeons to set it perfectly, no pain medication stronger than chewing on some bitter bark, if you even knew which bark that was. Your only hope would be a traditional healer who might attempt to splint it with sticks and hide, or perhaps apply poultices of unknown efficacy. Historians still argue whether some ancient bone-setting techniques were truly effective or simply a shot in the dark, but what is clear is that the risk of permanent disability or gangrene from a poorly set fracture was immense. You might survive the break itself, but live the rest of your short life with a deformed limb, making every task, from walking to foraging, a painful, constant struggle. A quirky tidbit: some ancient American cultures did develop surprisingly effective herbal remedies. For example, willow bark, which contains salicin, a compound chemically related to aspirin, was widely used to reduce fever and pain. So, while they didn't have ibuprofen, they did have some natural painkillers. But knowing which plant to use, where to find it, and how to prepare it correctly would be a lifetime's worth of learned knowledge, not something you could just Google. And even the most potent herbal remedy wouldn't stand a chance against a severe bacterial infection or a deep, festering wound. Beyond injuries, imagine battling a simple flu. You know, the kind that lays you low for a few days, makes you feel miserable, but eventually you bounce back. In ancient times, with bodies constantly undernourished and often dehydrated, a strong fever could easily lead to delirium, seizures, and death. There were no four fluids, no antipyretics to bring the temperature down, just your body's raw fight against the illness. You'd be utterly dependent on the care of others, and even then, without understanding the cause of the sickness, their help might amount to little more than keeping you warm and comfortable as your body failed. The concept of germ theory was millennia away, so the idea that tiny, invisible things could make you sick was completely foreign. It would be a terrifying, mystifying experience to watch your own body, or that of a loved one, succumb to something unseen and incomprehensible. Every cough, every sneeze, every ache would carry a weight of potential doom that we, with our modern medical safety net, simply cannot fathom. So, you're injured, possibly sick, and still desperately hungry and thirsty. As if that weren't enough, stepping outside your makeshift dwelling means entering a world where you are no longer at the top of the food chain. Forget the cute squirrels and fluffy bunnies you might see in your backyard. Ancient America was a land teeming with creatures that saw you not as a complex sentient being, but as a potential meal. Imagine a rustle in the tall grass, not a gentle breeze, but something heavy, deliberate. Your heart would pound, not with excitement, but with primal fear. Could it be a cougar, a silent hunter with eyes that pierced the darkness and claws that could shred you in an instant? Or perhaps a bear, massive and powerful, defending its territory or cubs? These weren't animals to be admired from behind the safety of a zoo enclosure. They were immediate, tangible threats, perfectly evolved predators designed to stalk, kill, and consume. Your senses, dulled by modern living, would have to reawaken in an instant. The faint scent of musk, the snap of a twig, the almost imperceptible shift in the air. Your life would literally depend on it. One mainstream historical fact is that megafauna, enormous animals like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, coexisted with early humans in North America for thousands of years. While many of these larger species eventually went extinct, their presence during the earlier periods meant that humans were truly just another part of the ecosystem, often a vulnerable one. You weren't the apex predator by default. You had to earn that spot and constantly defend it. It wasn't just the large carnivores, either. Picture reaching into a hollow log for firewood and pulling back your hand just in time to avoid a venomous snake, coiled and ready to strike. Or wading into a shallow stream for water and realizing too late that a snapping turtle, or even an alligator in warmer regions, was lurking beneath the surface. Every natural feature, every dense thicket, every murky pool held the potential for a life-ending encounter. There were no warning signs, no park rangers, no emergency services. Just you, your wits, and whatever crude weapon you might be carrying. A quirky tidbit: Some ancient Native American groups had sophisticated ways of dealing with dangerous animals, beyond just hunting them. For instance, certain tribes would use specific calls or even dance rituals believed to ward off certain spirits associated with predatory animals, or to gain their favor. This wasn't just superstition, it was a psychological tool to cope with a constant, terrifying reality, and perhaps a way of reinforcing collective knowledge about animal behavior. Historians still argue whether the decline of the megafauna was primarily due to climate change or overhunting by early humans. But either way, for a significant period, you were sharing the landscape with creatures far larger and stronger than yourself. Imagine encountering a giant short-faced bear, a beast far more formidable than any grizzly, capable of running faster than you and possessing immense power. Your chances, let's just say slim to none, would be optimistic. You'd be constantly aware, constantly vigilant. Every shadow would hold potential danger. Every sound in the night would make your heart race. Your sleep would be light, punctuated by the sounds of the wild, forcing you to develop a hypersensitivity to your surroundings that your modern brain has long since discarded. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we briefly mentioned? That's the level of inventiveness born from necessity. Your survival wouldn't be about comfort or convenience. It would be about recognizing threats, avoiding them when possible, and facing them with incredible courage or desperate ingenuity when avoidance wasn't an option. The sheer mental exhaustion from this constant state of alert would be almost as debilitating as the physical dangers themselves. You'd be living on the edge, always. You've made it through the dangers of the wild, perhaps narrowly escaping a hungry predator, but now the sky darkens and the wind picks up. Remember your thermostat at home, perhaps set to a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit? Forget that. Here, in ancient America, you are utterly at the mercy of the elements. And the elements, let me tell you, were not feeling particularly merciful. Imagine a searing summer day in the desert Southwest. The sun beats down with an intensity that seems to suck the moisture right out of your skin. The air shimmers, and the ground beneath your bare feet, or crudely wrapped ones, is scorching hot. Dehydration, heat stroke, and severe sunburn aren't just risks, they're almost guarantees. There's no air conditioning, no icy drinks, no escape into a cool, darkened room. Your only recourse might be a shallow cave, offering minimal shade, or perhaps a crudely woven shelter of branches and leaves that does little more than break the direct sunlight. You'd spend your days in a constant battle against the relentless heat, conserving every drop of sweat, desperately seeking any patch of shade. One mainstream historical fact is that early human populations often migrated seasonally, moving to higher altitudes in summer to escape the heat or to warmer lowlands in winter. This wasn't a leisure trip, it was a desperate necessity, dictated by the brutal realities of weather patterns. You couldn't just tough it out when a blizzard rolled in or a heat wave settled for weeks. Now flip the coin. Picture yourself in the depth of winter in a more northerly region. The wind howls, carrying with it a biting cold that seeps into your very bones. Snow falls, relentlessly, burying the landscape under a thick, white blanket. Your clothing, probably animal hides crudely stitched together, would offer some protection, but nowhere near the warmth of your modern parka. Frostbite would be a constant threat, turning fingers and toes black and useless. Hypothermia, a silent killer, would creep up on you, making you lethargic, confused, and eventually, ending your struggle in a deceptive sense of warmth. Your shelter wouldn't be a sturdy house with insulated walls and a roaring furnace. It might be a lean-to, a small cave, or perhaps a temporary wickiup or wigwam made of bent saplings and bark. These structures, while ingenious for their time and materials, were drafty, damp, and offered only a marginal barrier against the extreme cold. You'd huddle around a small fire, desperately trying to keep the flames alive, the smoke stinging your eyes. Sleep would be fitful, broken by shivers and the constant awareness of the biting cold outside. Historians still argue whether early housing structures were primarily driven by defensive needs or climatic conditions, but undoubtedly, battling the elements was a paramount concern. A quirky tidbit: some ancient Arctic peoples, like the Inuit, developed incredibly efficient ways to stay warm, including wearing layered clothing made from caribou hides, which provide excellent insulation, and building snow shelters, igloos, that, surprisingly, can be much warmer than the outside air due to snow's insulating properties and clever ventilation. But these were highly specialized skills and resources, not something you'd intuitively know or have access to if you were dropped into a random ancient American winter. Every day would be a negotiation with the weather. Too much rain and your shelter would be soaked, your fire extinguished, and hypothermia a real danger. A severe drought and your precious water sources would vanish, crops would fail, and dust would fill the air. You wouldn't just be enduring the weather, you'd be living in a constant state of adaptation, always reacting, always striving to find that delicate balance between survival and succumbing to the forces of nature. The sheer discomfort, the gnawing cold or stifling heat, would be an ever-present companion, draining your energy and making every task an even greater ordeal. You'd miss your duvet, your central heating, and even the simple joy of a hot shower more than you could possibly imagine. So, you've battled the elements, perhaps scraped by with some foraged food, and narrowly avoided becoming dinner for a very large cat. Now, about putting actual food on the table consistently. While early human groups relied heavily on hunting and gathering, the advent of agriculture dramatically shifted human societies. But don't imagine a quaint little garden with neatly tilled rows. This was farming as brutal, back-breaking labor, demanding every ounce of your strength and offering no guarantees. Imagine, for a moment, clearing land. You don't have a bulldozer or even a steel axe. You have a stone axe, laboriously chipped and ground, or perhaps you're using fire to clear brush, a risky endeavor in itself. Every tree, every stubborn root, every rock has to be removed by hand. The blisters on your hands would be constant, splitting and bleeding, turning your palms into raw, painful messes. Your back would ache perpetually, your shoulders would burn, and every muscle in your body would scream in protest. And that's just step one. Next, preparing the soil. No plows pulled by oxen or tractors here. You're using a digging stick, literally a stick, to break up the earth, creating small mounds for planting. This is slow, monotonous, incredibly arduous work. One mainstream historical fact is that the domestication of crops like maize, corn, beans, and squash in Mesoamerica and later spreading north formed the agricultural bedrock for many ancient American civilizations. This Three Sisters planting method, where these crops were grown together in symbiotic harmony, was an ingenious adaptation, but it still required immense human effort. Now, you plant your seeds, but the work is far from over. You're constantly weeding, battling against nature's relentless drive to reclaim the disturbed earth. You're scaring away birds, deer, and other animals intent on raiding your precious food supply. And you're praying for enough rain, but not too much. Praying for sun, but not a scorching drought. Your entire community's survival rests on the whims of the weather and the success of your harvest. There's no crop insurance, no government subsidies, no backup plan if the harvest fails. Historians still argue whether the transition to agriculture initially improved or worsened human health, as it often led to a less varied diet and higher rates of infectious diseases in denser populations. A quirky tidbit: some ancient farmers, particularly in the arid regions, developed ingenious irrigation techniques, like chinampas in Mesoamerica, often called floating gardens. These were artificial islands built in shallow lake beds, incredibly fertile and productive, but requiring constant maintenance and a deep understanding of water management. It wasn't just about throwing seeds in the ground. It was about shaping the very landscape to produce food. And when harvest time finally arrives, it's a race against the clock. Every stalk of corn, every bean pod, every squash has to be picked by hand. Then, it has to be processed, dried, ground, stored, all without modern machinery. Imagine grinding corn into flour using a mano and matate, essentially two stones, for hours on end, day after day. Your arms would ache, your wrists would throb, and the fine dust would get into everything. This wasn't a hobby. It was the relentless, exhausting core of your existence. The threat of famine was ever present. A single pest infestation, an unexpected frost, or a prolonged drought could wipe out an entire season's labor, leaving you and your community facing starvation. The stress of this constant vulnerability would be immense. You'd understand, truly understand the value of every single kernel of corn, every bean. There was no casual waste, no throwing out leftovers. Every crumb was precious. Every bit of sustenance a testament to the sheer effort it took to bring it forth from the earth. You'd look at a modern supermarket, overflowing with abundance, and simply not comprehend such a luxury. You've toiled in the fields, battled the elements, and generally felt pretty awful most of the time. Now, let's talk about the people around you. You aren't a lone wolf in ancient America. You're part of a community, a tribe, a village. And navigating that community would be far more complex and perilous than your modern interactions. Forget cancel culture. Here, social missteps could literally be fatal. Imagine living in a small, close-knit group where everyone knows everyone else's business, and there are no written laws, no police force, and no judicial system as you understand it. Instead, there's a complex web of unwritten rules, customs, traditions, and taboos. You wouldn't just violate a social norm. You'd commit an offense against the very fabric of your community. And the repercussions? They could range from ostracism, which in a survival-based society is akin to a death sentence, to physical punishment, or even banishment. There's no escaping to another town. Every other group would be suspicious, potentially hostile. One mainstream historical fact is that many ancient American societies were organized into complex social hierarchies, often with chiefs, elders, shamans, or warrior elites at the top, and commoners or even slaves at the bottom. Your place in this hierarchy would determine everything: who you could marry, what tasks you performed, how much food you received, and how much respect you commanded. And moving up that ladder? Extremely difficult, usually earned through exceptional skill, bravery, or spiritual power. Moving down? Alarmingly easy. Consider the role of elders. Their wisdom, accumulated over a lifetime of brutal survival, would be paramount. They'd be the living libraries, holding the knowledge of medicinal plants, hunting routes, agricultural cycles, and the stories that explain the world. Disrespecting an elder wouldn't just be rude. It would be seen as a direct threat to the community's collective knowledge and survival. It's like unplugging the internet, only worse, because the internet can be rebooted. An elder's lost wisdom is gone forever. A quirky tidbit: some ancient American cultures had very specific and elaborate initiation rites for young people transitioning into adulthood. These weren't just parties. They were often physically demanding, spiritually intense trials designed to test courage, resilience, and knowledge of tribal traditions. Failing one of these rites might mean never truly being accepted as an adult, forever marginalized within your own community. It's a bit more intense than getting your driver's license, wouldn't you say? Historians still argue whether some ancient social structures were truly egalitarian or always had underlying power dynamics. But what's clear is that individual liberty, as we conceive it today, was a foreign concept. Your identity was almost entirely subsumed by the group. You existed for the community, not as a sovereign individual with inherent rights. Your worth was measured by your contribution to the collective survival, whether that was through hunting, farming, weaving, or caring for children. There was no room for self-expression that didn't align with the group's needs. Imagine the constant pressure to conform, to perform, to never make a mistake that could jeopardize not just your own life, but the lives of those around you. Gossip and rumor could be devastatingly effective tools for social control. A whispered accusation, a perceived slight, could snowball into a social exclusion that would leave you utterly alone in a world designed for group survival. And remember, that crocodile dung sunscreen? That kind of unconventional thinking might get you celebrated if it worked, or exiled if it was seen as strange or dangerous. You wouldn't just be worried about fitting in. You'd be worried about being deemed expendable. It's a subtle, constant, and incredibly powerful form of stress that would wear you down just as much as hunger or cold. So, you're navigating the intricate social maze of your ancient community, constantly aware of unspoken rules and power dynamics. But even within your own group, and certainly outside it, there's another looming threat: conflict. Forget diplomatic negotiations and international treaties. In ancient America, disputes often escalated to brutal, personal, and devastating warfare. Imagine a sudden shout, a chilling war cry piercing the quiet morning. You grab whatever weapon you possess: a spear, a stone club, a bow with arrows tipped with sharpened stone. Your heart pounds a frantic rhythm against your ribs. This isn't a staged battle reenactment. It's a fight for survival, for your family, for your very existence. The stakes are absolute: victory or death, perhaps enslavement. There were no Geneva Conventions here, no rules of engagement beyond what your group deemed acceptable. One mainstream historical fact is that warfare was a common, albeit varied, feature of many ancient American societies. Conflicts could arise from resource competition, a prime hunting ground, a fertile river valley, access to a vital water source. They could also stem from revenge for past wrongs, the taking of captives, or even for prestige and spiritual power. It wasn't always massive armies clashing. Often, it was small raiding parties, quick and brutal ambushes designed to inflict maximum damage and terror. Think about the psychological toll. You'd live with a constant, low-level hum of anxiety, always vigilant, always aware that a rival group could appear at any moment. Your dreams might be haunted by images of battle, and your waking hours consumed by the need to fortify your village or hone your fighting skills. There were no standing armies or professional soldiers in the modern sense. Every able-bodied person, including women in many societies, would be expected to defend the community. You wouldn't just be a farmer or a gatherer. You'd be a warrior, ready to fight at a moment's notice. A quirky tidbit: some ancient Mesoamerican cultures, like the Aztecs, engaged in flower wars, which were ritualized conflicts primarily intended to capture sacrificial victims for their elaborate religious ceremonies rather than to gain territory. While still deadly, these had a different underlying purpose than the resource-driven skirmishes of other groups. This highlights the incredible diversity of warfare's forms and motivations across the continent. Historians still argue whether the scale and intensity of warfare in ancient America increased with the rise of agriculture and larger settlements, as more resources meant more reasons to fight over them. But regardless of the cause, the impact on individual lives was profound. If you weren't killed, you might be wounded, forever scarred, and perhaps disabled in a world with no social safety net. You might see your home burned, your family scattered, or your children taken captive. And what about the weapons? No firearms, no body armor beyond perhaps some hardened hides or woven materials. You'd be facing hand-to-hand combat, relying on brute strength, agility, and the sharp edge of a stone axe or obsidian blade. Imagine the sheer terror of facing an opponent with a club studded with obsidian shards, designed to rip and tear flesh. It's a level of visceral violence that is utterly alien to your modern experience. You wouldn't just be fighting for victory, you'd be fighting for your very life, and the consequences of losing were unimaginable. The peace and security you take for granted in your everyday life would be a distant, impossible dream. Every peaceful night would feel like a fragile blessing. Every sunrise a reminder that the world was still a dangerous place. So, you've survived potential battles, navigated social landmines, and still, the basic necessities loom large. Let's delve into a topic that rarely gets airtime in your pristine modern world: sanitation. Or, more accurately, the utter lack thereof. Imagine a world without toilets, without soap, without flushing water, and without the concept of germs causing disease. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a silent killer, constantly lurking. Picture your ancient dwelling. Whether it's a simple lean-to, a wickiup, or a more permanent structure, there's no bathroom. When nature calls, you find a discreet spot in the bushes, or perhaps a designated area just outside the camp. This might sound manageable, but multiply that by dozens, if not hundreds, of people over weeks, months, years. Waste would accumulate, human and animal waste, and it wouldn't just sit there. Rain would wash it into streams, the very streams from which you draw your drinking water. Insects, flies, and other carriers would feast on it, then land on your food. It's a perfect, gruesome cycle for the spread of disease. One mainstream historical fact is that ancient populations, globally, suffered immensely from diseases related to poor sanitation. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and various parasitic infections were rampant, often decimating communities. The connection between waste and sickness was largely unknown. Instead, illness was attributed to angry spirits, bad air, or divine displeasure. So, you wouldn't just be sick, you'd be sick and utterly baffled as to why. Now, about personal hygiene. There's no shower, no bathtub, no shampoo. You might occasionally bathe in a cold stream, if it's safe from predators and doesn't freeze over in winter. Soap, as you know it, didn't exist. Some cultures might have used certain plant-based cleansers, but daily washing with germ-killing agents? Forget about it. Your skin would be a canvas of dirt, grime, and sweat. Your hair would be greasy and matted. And the smell? Let's just say you wouldn't be smelling like a fresh spring meadow. This isn't just about being a bit grubby. It's about the constant presence of disease causing bacteria on your skin, under your fingernails, and in every corner of your living space. A quirky tidbit. Some ancient societies, particularly more complex urban ones like those in Mesoamerica, did develop rudimentary sanitation systems, including drains and waste disposal pits, which were far more advanced than what you might expect. However, these were localized solutions, not widespread practices, and still operated without the fundamental understanding of germ theory. So, while some cities were better, most smaller settlements were still very much owed to ancient filth. Historians still argue whether the lack of sanitation or the constant exposure to new pathogens as populations moved and interacted more was the greater cause of disease in ancient times. But for you, the individual, it would be an unavoidable reality. Every meal, every drink of water, every scratch or cut would be an opportunity for disease to enter your body. You'd be living in an environment that actively, constantly, tries to make you sick. Imagine the flies. Swarms of them, buzzing around food, around waste, landing on your face while you try to sleep. And the smell. The pervasive, inescapable odor of unwashed bodies, smoke, animal hides, and decaying organic matter. Your senses, accustomed to the sanitized, artificially scented world of today, would be in constant assault. You wouldn't just be uncomfortable, you'd be living in a state of perpetual low-grade nausea. The concept of clean would be a luxury, a distant fantasy. You'd truly appreciate the wonder of flush toilets and hot running water like never before. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, at least it covered some of you. Now imagine the rest. Not a pretty picture, is it? So, you're dirty, possibly sick, and constantly vigilant against threats both microscopic and toothy. Now let's talk about your wardrobe. Forget fast fashion or even slow fashion. In ancient America, your clothing was a matter of survival, often painstakingly crafted, and offered minimal protection against the harsh realities of your daily life. Imagine waking up to a biting wind. You instinctively reach for your warmest coat, your thickest socks. Here, you'd be lucky to have a single, well-worn tunic made from woven plant fibers or perhaps a crude animal hide. This isn't about style. It's about not freezing to death or getting shredded by thorns. Your clothing would be practical, durable, and probably very itchy. There were no zippers, no buttons, no elastic. Everything would be tied, laced, or sewn with sinew or plant fibers. Getting dressed would be a ritual of practicality, not personal expression. One mainstream historical fact is that early peoples used a wide variety of natural materials for clothing, including animal skins, deer, rabbit, bison, plant fibers, yucca, agave, cotton in warmer regions, and even bark. The specific materials depended entirely on what was locally available and how skilled your community was at processing them. Imagine tanning an animal hide, a long and arduous process involving scraping, stretching, and often treating it with brains or urine to make it pliable. It's not something you'd whip up on a rainy afternoon. And the protection it offered? Minimal. Against the sun, perhaps a bit of shade. Against thorns and sharp rocks, a thin layer of hide that would tear easily. Against cold, well, it was better than nothing, but it wouldn't stand up to a harsh winter storm. You'd be constantly patching tears, restitching seams, trying to prolong the life of your precious garments. The idea of having multiple outfits, or even different clothes for different seasons, would be utterly alien. You'd have one, maybe two, serviceable outfits, and that would be it. A quirky tidbit. Some ancient cultures, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, developed incredibly sophisticated methods of weaving cedar bark into textiles that were surprisingly soft, durable, and waterproof. This wasn't just practical. It was an art form, passed down through generations, showcasing an incredible mastery over natural materials. But again, highly localized, and not something you'd be able to do without years of apprenticeship. Historians still argue whether early human clothing was primarily for warmth and protection or also served significant social and ritualistic purposes, indicating status or group identity. But for you, simply trying to stay alive, the primary concern would be its utility. Imagine venturing through dense brush, gathering firewood, or hunting with nothing but a thin hide wrapped around you. Every scratch, every scrape, every insect bite would be a constant annoyance and a potential source of infection, as we discussed. And footwear? If you had any, it would be crudely made sandals from woven fibers or animal hide, offering little cushioning or arch support. Walking for miles, often over uneven and rocky terrain, would leave your feet bruised, blistered, and aching. The relief of slipping on a pair of modern running shoes would be almost spiritual. Your clothing, or lack thereof, would also expose you to the elements in ways you simply aren't used to. Sunburns would be constant, your skin constantly exposed to the harsh UV rays. Insect bites would be a daily reality, leading to itching, swelling, and the risk of disease transmission. Even minor cuts and abrasions would be more frequent due to the lack of protective layers. You wouldn't just feel less comfortable, you'd be physically more vulnerable every single moment of your life. The luxury of picking out an outfit in the morning, or even owning more than a handful of garments, is a modern convenience so profound that you simply cannot truly appreciate it until it's gone. So, you're clothed in scratchy hides, constantly battling the elements, and living a life where every cut could be a catastrophe. Now, shift your perspective to the very youngest among you. If you think your childhood was tough, or that raising kids today is a challenge, try to imagine bringing up children in ancient America. It's a sobering thought, a grim reality check on the fragility of life. Imagine welcoming a new life into this world. There are no hospitals, no sterile environments, no trained doctors or midwives with decades of experience. Childbirth would be a deeply communal, but incredibly dangerous event. Infections, hemorrhage, and complications during delivery were leading causes of death for both mothers and infants. If you or your child survived the birth, you'd then face the overwhelming likelihood of infant and childhood mortality. One mainstream historical fact is that in many ancient societies, as much as 30 to 50% of children did not survive to adulthood, often succumbing to diseases, malnutrition, or accidents before the age of 5. Think about that statistic for a moment. Roughly half of all children wouldn't make it. It's a truly heartbreaking reality. A child's world would be one of constant exposure to the cold, to the heat, to the same questionable water that makes adults sick, to the dangers of wild animals, and to the ever-present threat of accidental injury. There were no padded playpens, no child-proofed homes, no carefully vetted playgrounds. A curious toddler wandering too far from camp could quickly become lost, fall into a river, or encounter a predator. Every moment of a child's early life would be a precarious dance with danger. And what about their development? There were no schools, no books, no toys designed for early learning. Instead, children learned through observation and imitation, through direct participation in the daily tasks of survival. From a very young age, they would be expected to contribute to the family's well-being. A child of 5 or 6 might be gathering firewood, helping with foraging, or tending to younger siblings. There was no concept of a prolonged, carefree childhood. Play, while undoubtedly present, would often mimic the serious activities of adult life, preparing them for the arduous future that awaited. A quirky tidbit: despite the harsh realities, some ancient cultures had remarkably tender practices for infants. For instance, many groups used cradle boards, which are essentially portable, protective beds for babies. While practical for carrying and keeping infants safe from elements and insects, some historians still argue whether the prolonged use of cradle boards contributed to skull-shaping practices, either intentionally or as a side effect. It shows a blend of practicality and cultural adaptation even in the most fundamental aspects of childcare. Historians still argue whether the high rates of child mortality fostered a different kind of emotional attachment to children, perhaps a more stoic acceptance of loss, or if the grief was just as profound but expressed differently. What is undeniable, however, is the constant anxiety parents would live with. Every cough, every fever, every fall would be a terrifying ordeal, knowing how easily a small life could be extinguished. You wouldn't just be worried about getting your child into the right preschool, you'd be worried about whether they'd live to see their next birthday. The mental and emotional burden of raising children in such precarious conditions would be immense. And if a child survived into their teenage years, they would already be hardened, resilient individuals, fully capable of contributing to their community's survival. They wouldn't be thinking about college applications. They'd be mastering hunting techniques, agricultural cycles, or the intricate art of tool making. Your carefree, protected, and prolonged adolescence would be utterly incomprehensible to them. You've witnessed the struggle of daily life, the relentless grind for sustenance, and the stark realities of childhood in ancient America. Now, let's consider the invisible forces that permeated every aspect of existence: spiritual beliefs and the pervasive influence of superstition. This wasn't just about going to a place of worship once a week. It was about living in a world where the sacred and the mundane were inextricably linked, where every natural phenomenon had a spiritual explanation, and where unseen powers dictated your fate. Imagine a sudden, violent thunderstorm. To your modern mind, it's a meteorological event, perhaps an inconvenience. To someone in ancient America, it could be a powerful deity expressing anger or a benevolent spirit bringing much-needed rain. Every rustle of leaves, every animal call, every changing season would be imbued with deeper meaning. Your entire worldview would be shaped by the stories, myths, and rituals passed down through countless generations. Stories that explain the creation of the world, the origins of humanity, and your place within the grand cosmic order. One mainstream historical fact is that across ancient America, diverse and complex spiritual systems flourished, often centered around animism, the belief that spirits inhabit all natural objects and phenomena, ancestor veneration, and polytheism, the worship of multiple gods and goddesses associated with elements like the sun, moon, earth, and specific animals. These beliefs weren't abstract. They were practical, guiding decisions about hunting, planting, healing, and even warfare. You wouldn't make a major decision without consulting the spiritual realm, perhaps through a shaman or a dream interpretation. Consider the role of the shaman or spiritual leader. They wouldn't just be respected, they'd be revered, seen as intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds. Their knowledge of ceremonies, healing rituals, and dream interpretation would be vital. If you were sick, you wouldn't just seek a physical remedy. You'd seek a spiritual one, believing that your illness might be caused by an offended spirit or an imbalance in your soul. Remember that stub toe that got infected? A shaman might see it not just as an injury, but as a sign that you had displeased a spirit of the forest. A quirky tidbit: some ancient American cultures practiced hallucinogenic rituals using psychoactive plants like peyote or various mushrooms. These weren't for recreation. They were deeply sacred experiences, undertaken to connect with the spirit world, gain visions, or seek guidance from ancestors. Imagine trusting your life's direction to a vision induced by a plant, believing it to be a direct message from the divine. It highlights a profound difference in perception and belief. Historians still argue whether the elaborate spiritual practices and vast ceremonial centers, like the mounds built by the Mississippian cultures, primarily served religious functions or also had significant political and social control implications. But for you, the individual, these beliefs would be your operating system. Your fears, your hopes, your understanding of right and wrong, all would be filtered through this spiritual lens. You'd live in a world where omens were real, where dreams held prophecies, and where every animal you hunted, every plant you gathered, had a spirit that needed to be honored. The idea of a purely secular existence would be utterly incomprehensible. You'd probably carry talismans, participate in elaborate dances, and offer prayers and sacrifices to ensure a successful hunt or a bountiful harvest. The fear of displeasing the spirits or of incurring bad luck would be a constant background hum in your mind. This profound connection to the spiritual realm, while providing comfort and meaning, would also add another layer of constant stress and responsibility to an already incredibly challenging life. The simple act of eating, for instance, might involve thanking the spirit of the animal or plant that gave its life for your sustenance. It's a world steeped in reverence and awe, but also an immense, constant fear of the unknown. So, you're living a life intertwined with spirits and omens, battling daily for survival. Now, imagine needing to get from point A to point B in this ancient world. Forget cars, trains, planes, or even paved roads. Travel in ancient America was an arduous, dangerous, and often life-threatening undertaking, a testament to sheer endurance and willpower. Picture setting out on a journey, perhaps to trade with a neighboring tribe, or to find new hunting grounds, or perhaps to escape a rival group. Your primary mode of transportation? Your own 2 feet. You'd be walking, day in and day out, through dense forests, across scorching deserts, over rugged mountains, or through swampy wetlands. There were no marked trails as you know them, just animal paths or faint traces left by previous travelers. Every step would be a conscious effort, navigating uneven terrain, thorny bushes, and hidden obstacles. One mainstream historical fact is that despite the lack of modern infrastructure, extensive trade networks existed across ancient America, connecting distant communities and facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. This meant people did travel, often covering vast distances on foot, carrying heavy loads of goods like obsidian, seashells, copper, or rare feathers. Imagine carrying your entire inventory, plus your own survival gear, on your back for weeks or months. Your modern backpack, no matter how ergonomic, would feel like a feather compared to the burdens they bore. And the dangers weren't just the physical exertion. Remember those dangerous animals we talked about? You'd be traversing their territory day and night. Plus, the risk of encountering hostile human groups would be ever present. You wouldn't just be walking. You'd be constantly scanning your surroundings, listening for unusual sounds, and strategizing your path to minimize risk. Sleeping at night would mean finding a defensible spot, perhaps high ground, and maintaining a vigilant watch. Your sleep would be even more fragmented than usual, punctuated by every unfamiliar rustle or distant howl. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, particularly where rivers were significant, early peoples developed sophisticated watercraft, from simple dugout canoes carved from tree trunks to more complex reed boats. These allowed for faster travel and heavier loads, transforming the movement of goods and people. However, even river travel had its perils. Rapids, hidden rocks, sudden storms, and the ever-present threat of overturning and losing all your precious supplies, or worse, your life. No life jackets either, naturally. Historians still argue whether the challenges of travel limited cultural exchange more than it encouraged it, but it's clear that geographical barriers played a huge role in shaping distinct cultural developments. For you, the journey itself would be the main event, demanding every ounce of your physical and mental fortitude. There would be no rest stops, no convenience stores, no motels. You'd rely entirely on your own skills and the knowledge of your companions to find food, water, and shelter along the way. Imagine the blisters on your feet, the constant ache in your muscles, the gnawing hunger and thirst that accompanied every mile. A simple sprained ankle could leave you stranded, utterly dependent on the kindness of your traveling companions, or condemning you to a slow, painful end. There was no easy rescue mission. The concept of a comfortable journey, where you simply sit back and watch the scenery, would be completely foreign. Every step was a challenge, every sunrise on the road a quiet victory, and every sunset a prayer that you'd make it through another night. The journey wasn't just a means to an end, it was a brutal proving ground. You've just endured a grueling journey, perhaps with blisters on your feet and the gnawing ache of fatigue in your bones. Now, let's talk about the very foundation of survival in ancient America, your tools. Forget your smartphone, your power drill, your microwave. Every single item you possessed, from the knife you used to butcher game to the needle you used to stitch hides, had to be either found in nature or meticulously crafted by hand. This demanded an incredible level of skill, patience, and ingenuity that is almost entirely lost in our modern, mass-produced world. Imagine needing a sharp edge. You don't just reach for a kitchen knife. You need to find a suitable piece of flint or obsidian, a volcanic glass renowned for its sharp edges. Then, you embark on the painstaking process of flint knapping. This isn't just banging two rocks together. It's a precise, highly skilled art of striking the stone with another rock or antler, removing flakes in a controlled manner to create a sharp blade, a spear point, or an arrowhead. One wrong strike, and the whole piece shatters, forcing you to start all over again. Your fingers would be cut and sore, your patience tested to its absolute limit. This process, a mainstream historical fact, was central to tool-making for millennia across ancient America. Consider building a shelter, or a canoe, or even just a digging stick. You need an axe. Not a gleaming steel axe from the hardware store, but a ground stone axe. This involves finding a suitable, hard river stone, then painstakingly grinding it against another, coarser stone, often with sand and water as abrasives, for hours, days, weeks even, until you've created a sharp, durable edge. Then you have to haft it, attaching it to a wooden handle with sinew or plant fibers, hoping it doesn't break on the first swing. Every tool was a significant investment of time and labor. A quirky tidbit: some ancient American cultures developed incredibly fine and intricate tools. For instance, the Clovis points, iconic spear points used by some of the earliest inhabitants of North America, are masterpieces of flint knapping, often symmetrical and incredibly sharp, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of lithic technology. And for more mundane tasks, they even had ingenious simple tools. Imagine using a deer antler tine as a pressure flaker to put the finishing touches on an arrowhead, applying precise force to remove tiny flakes, making the edge razor sharp. Historians still argue whether the development of certain tool technologies drove migration patterns or if environmental changes led to the need for new tools. But what's undeniable is the direct link between your tools and your ability to survive. If your spear breaks during a hunt, your dinner and safety are compromised. If your digging stick snaps, foraging becomes much harder. Your very existence was dependent on the quality and availability of your self-made equipment. There was no tool store, no Amazon Prime delivery. If you needed something, you either made it yourself or traded for it with someone who had. This meant not only mastering the skills of creation, but also knowing where to find the raw materials. You'd need to identify the right type of stone, the strongest wood, the most durable fibers. This knowledge was passed down through generations, often through direct apprenticeship, reinforcing the social structures within the community. The satisfaction of creating something with your own hands, something vital for your survival, would be immense. But so too would be the frustration of failure, the pain of a misplaced strike, the despair of a broken tool when you desperately needed it. You'd develop a profound respect for every object you possessed, understanding the immense effort that went into its creation. The throwaway culture of modern life would be incomprehensible. Every broken arrow, every dull blade, would represent wasted effort and potential hardship. You'd probably spend your evenings by firelight, not scrolling, but meticulously sharpening, repairing, and crafting, because your life quite literally depended on it. You've toiled, built, hunted, fought, and navigated a world where every single day was a direct negotiation with nature and fate. Now, let's consider the invisible burden, the silent weight that would press down on you constantly, the mental and emotional strain of simply surviving in ancient America. This isn't just about physical discomfort. It's about the relentless psychological toll of a life lived on the knife edge. Imagine the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that would be your baseline. Where will the next meal come from? Is that rustle in the bushes a friendly deer or a hungry cougar? Will the river flood, washing away our camp? Will sickness sweep through the village, taking loved ones? Every sunrise would bring the immense pressure of securing enough food and water, maintaining shelter, and staying safe. There were no weekends, no holidays, no sick days. The work of survival was 24/7, relentless and unforgiving. Your mind would be perpetually on, scanning for threats, calculating risks, and strategizing for the next moment of existence. One mainstream historical fact is that hunter-gatherer and early agricultural societies often developed strong communal bonds and shared responsibilities, which provided a crucial buffer against individual stress and hardship. You weren't alone in your struggles. Your survival was inextricably linked to the survival of your group. This collective effort, while demanding, also provided a sense of belonging and mutual support that is often lacking in modern, individualized societies. However, Even with this support, the fundamental pressures remained. Consider the pervasive nature of loss. You'd witness death frequently. Infants succumbing to illness, adults dying from injuries, the elderly fading away without modern palliative care. You wouldn't just hear about it on the news. It would be happening directly around you, to people you loved, constantly. There was no escaping grief, no easy way to process trauma. You'd likely develop a certain stoicism, a hardened resilience born of necessity, but the emotional scars would undoubtedly accumulate. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples had different psychological responses to stress and trauma than modern humans, but it's hard to imagine anyone being unaffected by such constant exposure to hardship and loss. A quirky tidbit: some ancient cultures incorporated trance states, ritualistic storytelling, or communal dances as ways to process shared trauma, reinforce social cohesion, and connect with the spiritual world for comfort and guidance. These weren't just entertainment. They were vital psychological tools for coping with an immensely stressful existence, a form of communal therapy in a world without therapists. Imagine the fear of the unknown. Without scientific understanding, every unexplained illness, every strange celestial event, every crop failure would be terrifying and potentially ominous. Superstition wouldn't just be quaint belief. It would be a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic, unpredictable world, adding another layer of anxiety to your daily decisions. Remember those spiritual beliefs we talked about? They offered comfort, yes, but also the constant worry of offending a spirit or failing to perform a ritual correctly. Your modern mind, accustomed to comfort, safety, and instant gratification, would be in a perpetual state of shock. The sheer mental fatigue from living in a high-stakes, high-stress environment would be debilitating. There would be no escape, no off switch. Your brain would be hardwired for survival, always alert, always calculating. You'd learn to live with a level of discomfort and fear that you currently only experience in nightmares, if at all. The very concept of leisure or relaxation, as you understand it, would be a foreign language. You would truly understand what it means to be a fragile human in a vast, indifferent, and utterly wild world. Now, as the ancient fire slowly dims to embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the cave walls of your mind, allow your thoughts to drift. The echoes of a world so stark, so demanding, begin to soften, like distant whispers on a gentle breeze. Feel the soft hum of your own room, the comforting weight of your blanket, the familiar quietude that surrounds you. That ancient struggle, the ceaseless search for food, the gnawing cold, the ever-present dangers, they recede now, becoming just a story, a faint memory on the edge of your consciousness. Let the modern comforts envelop you, the warmth, the safety, the quiet assurance of a world so vastly different from the one we explored tonight. You are here, safe in your own time, far from the watchful eyes of ancient predators or the biting sting of winter winds. The lessons of resilience, of ingenuity, of the sheer will to survive, they settled gently within you, a quiet understanding of humanity's long, remarkable journey. Allow your breath to deepen, to slow, as you drift further and further from the ancient past, back into the gentle embrace of the present. Let the soft darkness guide you, calming every thought, soothing every worry. Just relax now. Let go.